Welcome everybody to Clearwater Jazz Holiday's Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. Today's educator and guest musician is James Suggs, back with us. His topic is different approaches to swing. We are recording these sessions for the purposes of Clearwater Jazz education and outreach. Everybody's muted for the courtesy of the session. If you have questions, the chat feature, raise your hand feature can be utilized. If you have feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. info@clearwaterjazz.com. Check out all the upcoming Young Lions Jazz Master virtual sessions on our education and outreach page, clearwaterjazz.com/education. And there are Zoom links to join each of those sessions. A lot of great musicians and educators working with us well into August and beyond. James Suggs is special to Clearwater Jazz Holiday. He works with us on a variety of different education and outreach programs, from our Young Lions program to our History of Jazz program to the My Journey with Jazz program in the neighborhood family centers and the communities that we serve. James is a professional trumpet player currently living in St. Pete after spending 8 years living and playing in Argentina. James's resume is long and very impressive. Started playing trumpet at a very young age, and since that time, his talents have taken him all over the world. We're really lucky to have him as part of these sessions. He received a master's degree in music jazz performance from the University of South Florida, and also serves as an adjunct professor there. If you'd like to connect with James or to learn more about him, please visit him on Facebook, or be sure to check out his music wherever you stream your music. James, welcome back. The stage is all yours, my friend.
Thanks so much, Steve. It's always a pleasure to do these sessions, and to check out the ones that I'm able to check out with other local artists. We really appreciate what you're doing, and I hope that all of you out there appreciate it as well. So today's topic is another crazy one. Thinking about it at first, you say, okay, I just want to do this one. That'll, be easy, but it always ends up being really difficult to get all of my points across. So hopefully I can do it in a good manner this time. So the topic is different approaches to swing. And it's really difficult to explain swing, first of all. I think we all have a notion in our minds that what swing is to us. For instance, it's one of those things where it's like the blues, it's one of those things where you can give it a name. So for instance, swing, you can think of swing dance, right? And that's a whole nother thing. You're thinking Glenn Miller, you're thinking Tommy Dorsey, swing dance, all the dance moves and all that. But then also swing is a feeling, swing feel, right? So it's not just a noun, it's a verb as well. It's a rhythm, the swing rhythm. And that's the thing that I really want to focus on today, is that rhythm, because we all have different ways of expressing that swing rhythm, which is interesting. And I could do a whole dissertation on this probably, which I would love to do. But I think it all comes down to, once again, what we have listened to and what we are listening to. For instance, I'm sure the musicians that have grown up in New Orleans have a different swing approach than those that grew up in New York City, for instance. But then again, nowadays, the world is getting smaller and smaller. And for instance, with actual accents, my parents are from New England, and they used to have strong New England accents. And now you can't tell where they're from, because it's kind of, flattened out. Same thing with Southern accents, Southern United States, so I think, especially here in the States, accents and the way we talk are all kind of being similar. So I find that as well with swing in general. Steve mentioned that I lived in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I was surprised. I shouldn't have been, but I was surprised to find out that their swing is exactly the same as our swing, because we're all listening nowadays. We're all listening to the same recordings, and we get to choose which ones we want and how they'll influence our swing. So a lot of times with these sessions, I like to make a playlist on Spotify, which I did for this one, and it's called Different Approaches to Swing and Jazz. And I just made this big list of what I feel are iconic, different approaches to swing. So what is swing? First of all, it's one of those mysterious things that we can't really describe fully. Even writing it out, if you're trying to notate swing, it's almost impossible. There are people that notated the dotted eighth, 16th note way of writing it, or also there's the triplet. All these ways, and some people just write eighth notes, the swing eighths, and they tell you swing the eighth notes. So it's up to you to kind of swing them. I think it's the same that we find also in classical music, European classical music. These composers are long gone. There are no recordings, original recordings, or videos of them conducting. I'm talking about Bach and Beethoven and Mozart, for instance. So we are guessing what kind of rhythm or what kind of inflections we are to play with. I think it's the same thing with swing nowadays, except we do have some recordings, many recordings, but there are some that we don't have actual recordings of. So it's up to us to kind of figure out which way we want to go with that. So once again, I'm getting back to listening as much as possible. I can't stress this enough with all these sessions. I think we can all be grounded on that, that we need to listen to as much music as possible and figure out what kind of approach to swing we want. So let's talk about this list that I made that can be found on this website, and later it'll be documented within my the Trumpet videos and sessions, and there are a few other Spotify playlists. So first of all, Duke Ellington is on one of them, and this is kind of like a classic way to describe two big differences in the history of jazz as far as swing. You have Duke Ellington's great big band, and then you have Basie, Count Basie's great big band. And for me, there's always this like debate within, musicians, Duke or Basie, which one? And it's an impossible debate because they're both incredible, and there's really no way to debate that. But I think we always kind of say, especially with Count Basie, we always say that he has this laid back, that his band had this laid back kind of swing. So what does that mean? I think laid back kind of gets, foggy and weird through the years. And I'm almost hesitant to use that when I'm directing, for instance, a big band at USF, or if I'm in a trumpet section, I say, we got to lay this back. Sometimes it gets way too laid back and way too lazy, and that kind of loses the swing feel. So the difference, I think, between, and check out all these examples. Duke Ellington, I feel like, is right in the middle. So if we're thinking about the beat, everyone talks about the beat. And if we're talking about swing, we can literally think about a pendulum or a swing, an actual swing. So what is it? It has a starting point and an ending point. And if there's momentum, it'll keep doing that, right? As opposed to this. This, I don't think, is a good way to think of swing. One beat to another. That seems rigid, dot, 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 right? But if we're actually swinging pendulum, boom, ba, da, do, 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 ba, do, ba, da, or however you feel it. So wherever you add that extra note, if it's right here, or if it's right here, or if it's right here, that is how your swing is going to end up feeling. So if we're talking about Duke Ellington, I think it's more right, boom, da, 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 dee, da, 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 dee. And Basie has this later laid back kind of approach to that. do, da, da, do, da. So it's really similar, but it's different. Let me explain. I have a metronome I'm going to play on top. So now I'm going to play just a phrase in the style of Duke Ellington, where I'm going to try. Right? So if you think about it, I'm trying to play not too laid back. I'm trying to play right where that I hear each of those metronome beats. Do, da, 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 right? Now, Basie's kind of approach is what we end up calling laid back. Let me see if I can do that. It's a really slight difference, but if you get a whole big, we're talking about the whole big band. This is like 16, 17, 18 people all together, and we have to agree on what kind of swing we're going to play with. When I joined the Glenn Miller Orchestra, the first day, the first trumpet player called me aside and said, "Man, you're reading fine, your playing is fine, but you weren't swinging with us." Because I had my own way of approaching how I thought the swing was, and the rest of the band were all together in another approach. So what that took was me being more cognizant of where they're placing each note. Moving on the list, for instance, trumpet players. Art Farmer, I talk about him a lot because he's so special, I think. There are a lot of trumpet players in the history of jazz that are amazing, that were amazing. But it's really hard to, separate one from the other. There are a lot of, especially in the 50s and 60s, there are a lot of awesome trumpet players that just had that same kind of approach. Art Farmer was different. His approach, I feel, was more straight. I hate to use that term in jazz, but a straighter approach. Right? We'll do it with the metronome. So it's really legato, meaning those notes are tied together. There's not a lot of space in between it, and there's not these accents that we hear with a lot of other trumpet players. We don't hear a lot of that with Art Farmer, which is cool because he has his own approach. Now, someone like Lee Morgan has a lot of these. I think Lee Morgan is one of the most polar opposite swing approach to someone like Art Farmer, because he will lay back sometimes and he'll make things more staccato and there's more accents. Let me see. I mean, I'm trying the impossible. Let me see if I can do this. So I think overall Lee Morgan was more of a percussive player, which that has to deal with the swing as well. If we're talking about Art Farmer, if I was to show you with my hand how I feel he plays, there's not much peaks and valleys. Everything's smooth and well orchestrated and together. Lee Morgan has more of this kind of, and that's how he gets his style, his approach, which is really aggressive a lot of times, not all the time, but, and that's a swing kind of approach. It's a different kind of approach. And also he has a triplet kind of thing, right? Then back to kind of Art Farmer. More kind of evened out. So those are two swing approaches. So we're not just talking about exact rhythms. That's not the only thing. It does have to deal with that, but it also has to deal with accents, and if we're placing accents and where in the beat. So we have this bit, like I'm talking about, the in between these two beats, right? There's a lot of space where we could add something, right? So we need to figure out where we prefer to add that. Again, nothing is wrong. It's all up to you, up to your taste, fortunately. Cannonball Adderley is on there. Louis Armstrong is on there. Louis is interesting because, for many reasons, but when he started off, he was on top of the beat, and it was more of a staccato approach. Right? That's a traditional New Orleans approach. And then eventually he started laying a lot back. And the example I put on this playlist is with him with Duke Ellington, this awesome album. And he ends up playing kind of behind and taking his time on that beat. It's almost like he's floating and flying on top of it. So, I mean, it's interesting seeing that progression in one iconic musician and how they changed their approach to the beat. I used to have discussions with drummers about Max Roach. For those of you that know Max Roach, when he was playing with Clifford Brown, they had a famous quintet. And then, unfortunately, when Clifford passed, it seemed like Max Roach's swing became a little different. And I've had discussions with percussion teachers, and they've said, you know, they were so close together, such close friends, that something changed in his psyche, and that affected his swing. So go and check that out as well. Check out Max Roach's drumming with Clifford Brown, and then Max Roach later in the 60s, for instance. And I think it's more of a straighter ride pattern. Again, these are really minimal, finite little things that we're talking about, but I think that's how we get our own sound and how we understand each musician, iconic musician, through the years. Lester Young if we're talking about laying back, he was, you know, known for that. I mean, he influenced so many other saxophone players like Stan Getz, and you know, there's so many that you can hear that approach, that swing approach. And he took his time. It was almost like he was falling asleep. Right? So he's milking every little note and beat. The beat is still going on, but he's taking his time. He's floating on top of that. So that's another awesome approach. Bix Beiderbecke is I don't know if many have heard of him, but in the trumpet world, he's one of the icons. He died really young, and he was one of the first kind of Dixieland approach players. So that kind of style is more rigid. Right? This is an approach that I think is not as popular nowadays as far as the swing. You know, he's still an icon, and that style is still iconic. But as far as musicians that are playing that style, it's not that common unless you're doing specifically a Dixieland approach or tribute. And this is what I try to get students to kind of get away from. I think it's common that teachers teach the general swing feel, which it's like a Italian, I don't know, it's like a polka kind of thing, you know? And it kind of gets cheesy, for lack of a better word. In no way is Bix Beiderbecke cheesy in my mind, but that swing feel can get more and more exaggerated to the point where it becomes cheesy. So this is a cheesy way of doing it. Bada, right? Bix Beiderbecke was more together. Right? Another older style, but it still has that. It's not as if we go back to the Art Farmer approach, it's completely different from that. So it's legato, staccato, more space, less space in between those notes. So I put some, well, Clifford Brown is another iconic, stylistically swinging trumpet player, musician in the history. He almost had a straighter and more staccato approach, but it wasn't as straight or staccato as, for instance, Bix Beiderbecke, right? Trying to play fast on top of this, but so it was more of a staccato. He's notorious for that, and he played a lot of the classical studies and etudes. So he worked his tongue out, and he could play at those fast tempos. But if you listen to it, it's kind of more straight, more of a classical approach, even though it still swings. Some of the newer players, Roy Hargrove, who unfortunately passed not long ago, one of the iconic trumpet players of our generation. He had a more laid back triplet kind of thing, almost coming out of Lee Morgan style, right? Sean Jones, he's an amazing trumpet player, but it depends which night you hear him, it depends which song. And he will, change it up. He'll mix it. He'll go from playing staccato and really separate, and then he'll go to laid back legato. He mixes it up. And I think that's a thing that happens a lot today, because there's so much music that we've listened to, and we approach each song and each, depending on the band and how the background that we're playing on top of. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to jump in. I'm here for you. So let me know. One thing that I like to do with my students is, I'm using a metronome, which is good a lot of times, but not all the time for me. I think tapping your foot is one of the best ways of getting your own feel, your own rhythm, your own swing, and figuring out where you want to put that beat. So since it doesn't really make sense to tap my foot, because you probably won't hear it, I'm going to keep the metronome going. But instead, when you practice this at home, tap your foot and see if you can keep your foot as marked and as specific as the metronome, and don't let it waver. Now, the exercise is moving those swing notes around as much as possible and finding how far you can push and pull. That's another thing. Playing fast is I talk to students a lot about this as well. Playing fast, if you can do it convincingly slow, then you should be able to speed it up little by little. But it's hard to do it the other way around. To start just playing fast and then slow it down. So it's good to, this is really good for the metronome as well, using metronome. Starting off something slow and then little by little speeding up. And what happens is that I think naturally when you start playing faster, you don't have time to add that swing that we know. So it ends up being as more straight because there's not time. It's so fast, there's no time to do those accents as much as we normally would if we're playing a slower kind of approach. So again, another one that I forgot on the list is Thelonious Monk. And he's, I mean, he lists, especially the example I put on was I'm Confessing That I Love You. And this is from a lot of his solo stuff he was doing at that time, which is really mind-blowing because you hear his specific swing that you might not hear if when he's playing with a quartet. So you hear what he's doing. He has the rigidity of his left hand. Boom, he's playing a kind of a stride. Boom, dun, 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 and then his right hand is playing the melody. And the right hand ends up being really straight and disconnected, sometimes delayed, really staccato, right? But the thing is, he swings it so hard. He has his own specific swing, but it's this kind of groove that we all can get into. Let me start. I'm going to start just playing on top of the metronome, and I'm going to move the beat around as much as possible. Different styles. All right, any questions?
Hey, James, I don't see any questions from any of the participants just yet.
All right. The main thing I want to get, the point that I want to get across is that we need to be listening. Once again, we need to be listening as much as possible, not just to the notes they play. And we could be talking about Louis Armstrong or Lester Young or whoever, or your buddy next door, you know, at a jam session, or your teacher. Dissect their playing, you know, not just the notes they play, or the harmony, or the sound, but think about where they place each note within that pendulum beat, right? Figure it out. Be as obsessive as possible, because if you love their playing, you have to figure out why exactly you love their playing. And this swing field, this specific swing, everyone has a different way of approaching it. So we have to appreciate that and understand exactly how and where they place that note. Again, this the listening playlist has all these examples on it. Check it out and think. This is your goal. This should be your goal for this list, is to think about their individual swing. Would you call it more straight? Would you call it really laid back? Is there a lot of staccato? Is there a lot of legato? Again, staccato is separated notes. Legato is this long, drawn together approach of playing.
That's great, James. Are we at a pretty good stopping point, you think, right now?
I think so.
So talk to me a little bit of with how crazy it is out there. Have you been investing a lot of time practicing yourself?
It's been crazy. Like when this all started, I was on a strict regiment, every morning, every day practicing. And then, I started to just take little breaks, take a day off or here or there, just to kind of unwind and let myself relax, which I think is important for all of us in these days. So yeah, I mean, the good thing is that things like this kind of get me back to, thinking about how I want to improve as a musician. Obviously, we don't have many gigs. I've played a few during these few months, and those are always good to kind of check in, where I'm standing, where I am, and what to work on, knowing exactly what I should be working on. So it's been up and down, but hopefully I'll get back into the daily regimen.
Have you been working on anything creatively?
I've been drawing. I don't know if people know that I'm an artist as well, visual artist. I'm actually working on, let me see if I can show you if you haven't seen.
Cool.
This is something I'm working on. Speaking of Lee Morgan, this is a drawing of Lee Morgan. Hold on. So this is this the style that I love doing, kind of getting photos of musicians that I love, iconic musicians. And then it's a black matte board, and then I use, grayscale colored pencils to draw the face. So obviously it's not done. Still got to do the mouth and the trumpet and the fingers. But that's what I've been doing lately, just to kind of, before I was always complaining that I didn't have time to do things like this. So now I don't have that excuse.
That's incredible, James. I actually, it's almost kind of cool the way it is right now, with sort of like the face not complete.
Yeah.
I'm serious. That's really, really impressive. I did not know that this side of you.
Not a lot of people do. I mean, I actually started drawing before I started playing, and as soon as I started really getting into playing the trumpet, drawing kind of went by the wayside. But it's occasionally I force myself to, I'm always looking for the best black and white iconic photos of jazz musicians, so I can recreate that. Also back here, if you can see that there's a Coltrane one back there.
I can see that. No, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Of course.
Speaking of creative people, we have a lot of them joining us in upcoming sessions. James will be back with us. He's actually going to be doing a joint session again with Dwayne White. And if you hadn't seen the first time the two of them were together, check out that session. I believe it was called "Why Listening to Music is Important." And so they're coming back on July 21st with a theme around jazz trumpet solos. And so I'm excited about that. And then we have Austin Vickery on saxophone coming up with us with a topic on how to incorporate bebop into your improvisation. And Valerie Gillespie is going to be with us on a topic called communication among band members, which will be fantastic. Pete Carney is going to be back with us as well with a continuation of his Safer at Home practice method series, which was really, really great. And so I know he'll have some really interesting perspectives to share. And the list goes on well into August now and beyond. So check out the Clearwater Jazz Education and Outreach page and all of those upcoming sessions. Check out the studio, which you can link to right from that page, which archives the full recordings of all of these sessions, and in many instances has these great specially curated playlists or session materials. I've been really impressed with the work that the participating musicians are putting into these sessions. And we also have launched the Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions podcast, which is available on most platforms. So wherever you stream your podcast, search Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions, and you'll be able to listen to these sessions as well. We thank the Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation, our many sponsors and supporters, including the Al Downing Tampa Bay Jazz Association, for believing in the mission and keeping these sessions going. So James is representing me with the Al Downing shirt. I like it. And I see Lee there wearing the Clearwater Jazz Holiday, kicking the Clearwater Jazz Holiday merch. I like it, Lee. So James, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for being part of this. And we are looking forward to seeing you the next time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.